Outside of this crazy basket case of elections that we just experienced, what election stands out most to you?
In 1976, it was my first year I was able to vote. I can remember very vividly going to the Armory in South Carolina to register to vote for my first election. And Jimmy Carter was the Democrat running that year, and Gerald Ford was the Republican running that year as the incumbent. And I spent that summer of 1976 after my graduation from high school with my grandmother. And it was just a big deal. We went to Hawaii, and I worked in her store. She had a bookstore that she owned. I worked in her store, and every night we would go home and we would look to see if there were any primaries for that night. And we enjoyed watching the primaries and the debates. And my grandmother was a staunch Democrat, so she was wanting Jimmy Carter to win. I am a Republican. I was wanting Gerald Ford to win. But so it was just really funny. It was a very memorable summer for me.
Why else did this election stand out in your mind?
I had been looking forward to being able to register to vote for such a long time. That was such a big milestone in my life. I thought I finally graduated from high school. I'm finally able to vote. It was a very big deal to get my registration card. And I think it's a terrible shame that people today don't have that to look forward to. It was such a milestone in my life, and now it just seems that anybody can walk up and vote. You don't have to acquire that privilege anymore, and that's a shame, truly. I think it takes away some of our Americana, if you will.
Did your grandmother voice her opinion? Did you voice your opinion? How was the give and take since you both voted differently?
That's funny. So yes, we picked on each other, and we would hear an answer. One of the candidates would give an answer, and we'd laugh and poke fun at each other. It was all in fun. It was all in fun. It was just because I adore my grandmother and she adored me. So we were just able to have fun with it. There was no tension.
Did any of the debates that you watched change your mind about the person who was running for president?
No, I already knew what they stood for, and so my mind was really made up before we went into it. But I was open. I did listen, and to tell you the truth, I was born in Georgia. I was not opposed to Jimmy Carter. I just I just don't think like he does.
Did you vote in the primary, and did you vote for the same person as you did in the general election?
So I was staying at my grandmother's, but the vote process was such a big deal to me. I left my grandmother's in Georgia, came home to South Carolina to vote in the primary, and it was Reagan and Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter. I voted for Ronald Reagan in the primary. He did not win. I voted for Ford in the election.
As a new voter, did you pay attention to the candidates and where they stood on particular issues, or were you just planning to vote party lines?
So I gave both of them a fair shot. I weighed and processed everything that they said when they were debating, and I suppose that if Jimmy Carter had said anything along the same lines as what I believed, he could have swayed me, but he didn't. I paid close attention. My grandmother was just a party line Democrat, and from the old school, and I guess they called them Blue Dog Democrats, and so she was going to vote Democrat regardless, because she always said her daddy would turn over in his grave, and her granddaddy would turn over in his grave if she ever switched to Republican. So it's changed a lot over the years. I believe that even today they would probably vote with the Republican Party.
So what is one thing you remember about the elections themselves?
I remember the process. For me, it was driving to the Armory and going and standing in line with people from my age to end of age, and feeling very full of patriotic pride in being able to participate in such an important event, a life-changing event for our world. Is an election, and doing it with my registration card and presenting that made me very happy.
Are there any particular memories that you have of that summer that pertain to differences that you wouldn't have had before in life?
My grandmother was a very strong believer that patriotism should be an important factor in your life. It should never be overlooked. In fact, she bought a TV that summer so that together we could watch the debates and the primaries, and I would have that to take with me into my adulthood. And she wanted to instill in me the importance of patriotism and the importance of being a part of it, not being passive, but being an active part of the process of election. And that's very important to me. And I believe that because she instilled that in me, I have been able to instill that into my children, and my children are now instilling that into my 10 grandchildren. And that's important to me, and now it's important to them as well.
How did that summer's elections play a part in your current political ideology?
It was forming. It was a formative summer, and my grandmother made it a lot of fun. So we churned ice cream. She introduced me to Breyers ice cream. We had boiled peanuts at night. I know these things sound very, very simplistic, but she made that summer of politics a festive event. And so with my mom and dad, we'd sit around with my brothers and me. We'd sit around and play cards, and we'd talk politics, and we'd laugh, and we'd cut up, and it was a festive event, and we'd sit up all night and watch the returns. I did that with my children. It was a festive event. We had to know who won before we went to bed, and it was a festive time. It was fun, unless we lost. And then with my grandchildren now, 5 generations removed, we sit around and talk politics. We sit around and we play cards. We sit around the table and have a meal together, and we discuss politics. They research politics. They research policy. They research the people that are running. They want to know where they stand. It's not a game for them. It's not a game for my grandchildren. It's not a game for me. It's not a game for my children. It was not a game to my grandmother, my mom and dad, my brothers. It's very, very important. And it's important to know who you're voting for and what they stand on, because what they stand on is what's going to affect my great-grandchildren now, and my grandchildren now, and future generations, and it is important. It's exciting to me that is now important to my grandchildren, regardless of their age, except for the 6-month-old. She doesn't really care yet.
Are there any particular memories that you have of that summer that pertain to differences that you wouldn't have had before in life?
My grandmother was a very strong believer that patriotism should be an important factor in your life. It should never be overlooked. In fact, she bought a TV that summer so that together we could watch the debates and the primaries, and I would have that to take with me into my adulthood. And she wanted to instill in me the importance of patriotism and the importance of being a part of it, not being passive, but being an active part of the process of election. And that's very important to me. And I believe that because she instilled that in me, I have been able to instill that into my children, and my children are now instilling that into my 10 grandchildren, and that's important to me, and now it's important to them as well.